Jesse's lagging. Jesse's
Uh,
frozen.
eh, uh, uh, eh, uh, uh.
Yes,
Yeah,
those faces.
usually those faces, and then they get clipped and they make outrageous art in the
The
Discord.
memes, exactly.
Absolutely.
Welcome to The Dream Show, where each episode I sit down with someone just like you
I'm in a current phase of pushing myself to do things.
to decode the meaning behind your dreams and explore their connection with trauma, healing, and the subconscious mind.
I do like to watch and see where the dream takes me.
My name is Jesse Lyon, your host, a licensed counselor, certified trauma hypnotherapist, and a dream interpreter. So whether it's a nightmare,
I don't know why, but I knew that he was talking about me. And he comes storming up to the door. And I remember him shouting, "Where is my son?"
a bizarre scene, or something too weird to even describe,
It was so traumatic for me, literally, I have blocked all but this memory.
we dive in and learn to listen to the messages that your mind is trying to tell you. Let's jump into it.
You know, the whole point of this, and we'll probably leave this in the recording, is I want people to experience what like a dream therapy, dream counseling session would look like, because what I do in my private practice is so unique and nobody
Yes.
really knows what I mean when I talk about it. So
Yep.
I love the idea of you leading the conversation, take it where you want to go. Any of those unanswered questions, or maybe you want to dig deeper into that dream, I'm fine with whatever direction it goes. That's the
Okay.
whole point of today, as if you and I were meeting for our first therapy session.
Oh, that'd be awesome, dude. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now, of course, this is not therapy, right? This
No,
is
I
a recording for YouTube, but
Yes.
as close to the real thing as we can make it. That's great.
If I start getting freaky, just tell me and we'll stop.
Okay, fair enough. Well, as a counselor who works in complex post-traumatic stress, my freaky meter's a little broken. I don't know if it works anymore. I think it's just like it's real people's experiences, and real life is sometimes the freakiest of it all.
Well, it's funny because I know, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have called myself, I don't know, a Christian growing up per se. I grew up in church.
Sure.
I quote unquote got saved when I was 6. But the realization of a personal savior and all that stuff didn't hit me till I was 18. So I mean, a lot of this, I don't know. I've always had a very, very more open spiritual side, much more so than than my brothers and sister. And like just dreams, visions, stuff like that has always been a very normal, common thing for me. And I know 90% or more probably of the people I talk with don't understand it. So I find myself
Sure.
having to limit being able to share everything with people because for lack of being locked up in in a white suit or something that hugs behind you. Yeah, I the few times that I have taken the chance to open up to some people, I freak them out, quite honestly, just with the experiences that I've had. But yeah, no, I'm all open to. I love being able to share it. To me, it's a vital part of who I am, and what's made me who I am. I just met with my pastor a couple days ago, and I told him I have been doing therapy. I
Love that, Kevin.
I think I've shared this with you, but I can't recall. My very first experience with a counselor was in high school.
Okay.
We had we had health class back then. I don't know if they still do that in school or not, but
I don't
they
know.
had
I
this-
was homeschooled.
they were talking about, and one of the guy who was leading it says, he's passing out sticky notes. He's like, if you have any troubles or just want to talk to somebody, just put your name on here, and we'll contact you. Well, I was not that kind of person. Suicide was never an option. Like the thought of it never came to mind. I was a wicked happy-go-lucky kid, blah 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 blah. And I got called out of my favorite class, which was choir at that point. And I walked into, and it was so traumatic for me. Literally, I have blocked all but this memory.
Oh,
I walked
no.
into the office. I cannot recall if it was a male or a female, the counselor. But the first words out of that person's mouth was, "So I understand you want to kill yourself." That was my first experience with counseling.
No easing into it, huh? Like,
Yeah, needless to say, I spent the next hour explaining to this person why that was a foreign concept to me. And I remember them consistently trying to, um, like, oh, you're just covering, you're just hiding, this is a safe place, you can open up and tell me. I'm like, there's nothing to tell. I mean, there's legitimately, they're like, oh, you're
Yeah.
deflecting. So needless to say, I hated counselors. I mean,
Sure. I get it. And so many of the people that I talk to have a similar experience, whether it's like, a modality like EMDR, which kind of re-triggers the trauma and makes it worse, or,
mhm,
some counselor who, I don't know, was having an off day or a bad day, or maybe just shouldn't have been a counselor,
yeah,
saying some things that were really, really painful for
yep.
people. It's
But
unfortunately, that's a lot of the things that I hear, and I think it really is what has inspired me to create the group private practice that I run now,
right.
because we can be doing better.
Well, just every time I hear you talk about it, it just more and more motivates me. Like, honestly, dude, I just want to move to Florida just so I can be a part of your practice.
It'd be so fun.
uh,
Hey, it's a little hot down here, but I love my hometown
oh,
Florida, man. Central
oh
Florida
my
is
God.
great.
Yeah, I don't mind the heat at all, honestly. In fact, side note, I'm going to Belize in a few months for a missions trip with
Oh,
my church.
that's
That's
great.
that's gonna be
Belize would be
hot.
cool.
No
Yeah,
air
that's gonna be toasty.
conditioning, no air conditioning. So we're yeah,
Gonna be a little sweaty. It's gonna be a
yeah, a
little
little bit,
sweaty.
a little bit. But no. So, anyways, as far as the counseling thing goes, for me, it's like I must have met with 10, 12 counselors over the past 20 years.
Sure.
And every single one of them was just bad. Like, imagine Goodwill Hunting, Will Hunting sitting in
Mhm.
the office with all the got and like and literally like quoting back at them, like, I've read your book, this is what you are, this is what you represent, and I know about your latent homosexuality, and this like I mean that was me. I was the one that was telling them, like, dude, like you're not helping me at all. And every single one of them came back and said, we don't see anything wrong with you. And I'm like,
Oh Lord.
that's because technically speaking, there is nothing wrong with me except that I don't know how to deal with myself. And I don't
Yeah.
know, and I don't know how to process that, and I don't know how to talk to people, quote unquote counselors, in such a way that they can see, like, oh, we see what's going on with you. And it wasn't until this woman that I have now, in fact, the last counselor I had, it was a phone thing, and she's like, you should picture yourself like on a beach and just enjoy the warmth of the waves overcoming and the heat and the just enveloping you and embracing you, and like just have these positive ideas and your life will just get better. And I'm sitting there thinking, like,
Huh?
please tell me you don't have a certificate on your wall saying that you can do this, because legitimately that is the worst counseling experience I've ever had in my life.
No, it's
Um,
just not meeting you where you're at
uh, uh,
all.
she wasn't meeting reality. I mean,
It's, you know, can't argue with you there. It
but
is
no,
it is difficult. I tell people all the time, it's like, counseling is a really, really amazing thing, but you
yeah,
do have to find the right person for you.
yeah,
And I tell people, I'm like, if your counselor's not working, just fire him. There are so many great counselors out
right,
there. Like, I really trust that there's good people. You just do have to find them. And so, like, if your counselor's not working, it's okay to say goodbye. Like, you don't
right,
owe them anything. You're not stuck with them. Go find
right.
someone who does, and don't let a bad experience with one counselor who may not be right for you sort of sully your experience, and keep you from finding somebody who really can help you.
Right. Well, it's funny because sorry, I just got a pop up saying use hands gestures to add features. No,
Oh, that's fun.
yeah, the counselor I have now, I'll get her first name. I don't know if we're giving out, if we're not allowed to give them out or not, but
Go for it.
Erin. She I met her 2 years ago, through paid for by the state and stuff like that. So I was like, this is the last ditch effort. Let me just try it and see. And I went in. She's like, look, she's like, I want you to see this as a partnering. I'm here with you to help you walk
Good
through.
words.
And I just sat there, like, she made me feel so comfortable, and I
That's
just
what it's
like,
all about.
and the first year, like, I was dropping, to me, just trauma bomb after trauma bomb after trauma bomb. That's hard. Say that three times fast.
You did good. You did good. Trauma
um,
bomb, trauma bomb, trauma bomb. Blah, 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 blah,
but anyway, so yeah, she would listen and just walk through it, and then she took about a year off. I don't know if it was because of she had a baby. I can't remember exactly why, but she took a year off and called me back, and just past November, and I started meeting up with her again, and she's like, "Oh my God, Kevin, you've turned 180 degrees. You are so like." you were not the man I met a year ago, and I told her, I was like, a lot of it had to do with my church. I said, I really did learn a lot with her,
Mm.
that year that I was with her. And so now we're at the point where, we were meeting every week, then we moved it to like every 2 weeks, then once a month. And she got me on some good medication. And she tried this one thing for an ADHD, which made me crash. I had a
Oh,
depressive episode like I've never experienced in my life. And I called her back. I was like, "Can we get off this medicine?" She's like, "Yeah, I've never heard anyone have that thing," but she's like, "Yes, definitely. We'll switch back to your old stuff."
good,
so,
good.
um,
Well, I love
so
that it's a collaborative sort of process and effort. Like she's listening to you, you're listening to her, and that's really the
right.
way that it
My
should be.
my only, and I don't want to call it an issue, that's not the right word, but she loves to delve into the dream role when I share my dreams and stuff. But I listened to
Okay.
her explain this stuff, and I sit there thinking, I'm like, you have no clue what you're talking about. I gotta talk to Jesse.
Well, and Kevin, what a great segue. Well, so then Kevin, what dream do you got for us today? How can I help?
So as I was saying earlier, it's not so much dreams, it's just um it's this whole spiritual thing. In fact, I was talking with my pastor the other day. I told him that I do counseling on the side. And he said, the thing with depression is that it's a spiritual thing, and most counselors aren't really adept at. Well, and the other thing too is he was asking, he's like, is this like a psychiatrist or just a therapist? Because obviously there's different degrees and stuff like
There
that.
are there are differences in the mental health field.
Right. So, but he was suggesting that he's like, perhaps it would be good for you to, kind of get away from the therapy thing, the counseling thing, and
Oh,
turn
kind
more
of
towards.
against counseling and therapy.
Um, Not so much against it as having them. I hate saying that the third person, like, but it's like having them realize like they have their place, but it's not in the spiritual realm. Not, unless they're an actual Christian counselor, they're not really taught how to deal with specifically Christian, spiritual issues. I guess that's more along the lines. And so that was one of the things. And to be honest with you, I shared that same thought with her before he said that, that a lot of what I'm going through right now I know is more spiritual,
Mm,
um, and in the sense of, well, yes, spiritual as you typically think about it, but also more along the lines of mental. Um, how do I put it?
sure, sure.
Just my thoughts in general, that you can't really write it out in a book and saying, well, if you press A and then eat tab B and then insert into slot C, everything will be great. That doesn't work like that with the brain.
No, no, yeah, yeah. It's got to be
And
much more holistic.
right,
Well,
exactly.
I mean, you know me, Kevin. I certainly don't claim to be a pastor or spiritual leader. In fact, I kind of find myself on the opposite side of
I
that,
I
kind of
know.
poking some jabs at the spiritual side. And I totally respect like the religion and spirituality, but I do think it's interesting. And sometimes I'll talk with pastors who say that, and it's like, well, counselors should stay in their lane, and I'll rebut by saying, well, then I think pastors should stay in theirs. Don't
Yeah.
don't give my
Yeah.
client advice about anxiety and depression if you're
Right.
not trained in those things. It's like it goes both ways there, buddy.
You know,
Yeah.
I Well, see, and that's a funny thing. Like, off the subject a little bit, but like the whole separation of church and state thing, it's like there are times I wish, honestly, that church and state would come together. Pastors and therapists would come together, like, because I think there's so much that I had a friend who was a Catholic. I didn't grow up Catholic, but
Okay.
I went to his Bible study, and he would share these things that as a Protestant, I would be, theoretically, I probably should have laughed at and been like, "Oh my God, you're so fucking clueless." Sorry. Um,
Christians are.
that that you're so clueless, like, oh my God. But the funny thing is I realized that a lot of stuff that he was teaching me I had never learned growing up as a Protestant. I There were uh cardinal tenets, thought
Oh, it's true. There's
processes.
a lot to Catholicism. Yes.
And I had never grown up with any. And to me, there was a structure that Catholicism offered that Protestantism didn't.
Mm.
But to me, the meat was in the Protestantism. There was a lot of meat lacking in Catholicism, and so for me, I started blending the two and found my faith actually growing and becoming a lot more meaningful. It's like a skeletal system being added to the meat and bones, and or the
Yeah.
meat and
The muscle and
flesh and
tissue.
stuff. Yeah, that's the
Right.
word. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that's that's where I feel like it- there's so many, and I realize it's like as you were saying, it's like there are touchy subjects with people, and I get that, and
Mhm.
but honestly, I think that if we really opened ourselves up to both sides of the issue, getting some secular along with the sacred, I think that we would find a lot more tangibility to what we're going through. I
Yeah,
think,
yeah. I think
if
I
that
think
makes
the
sense.
question then kind of arises, like if that's kind of where we're going in today's conversation. I think the question then arises twofold for me. One, where is that line between the two, right? Like
Hmm.
how do they merge? Because I think the frustration with pastors is they feel like mental health counselors they feel are overstepping, and then the frustration with counselors is they feel like pastors are overstepping. And so I think
Hmm.
there's this question of like, well, where is the lane that each person is supposed to stay in? And
Right.
then perhaps an even more fundamental philosophical question below that is, well, what is the role of spirituality in a human being's life? How
Hmm.
do we kind of define that? And maybe that's a little bit of me, right? One of the
Yes.
things that I think is very fundamental to who I am is if we're going to have a conversation about something or even explore a topic, we have to define our terms.
Yep.
And that comes from like good speech and debate skills, right? If we're going to have an
Sure.
argument, if we're going to have a speech, a debate, or even just rhetoric or
Converse.
literature, right? You have to
Yeah.
define your characters, define your terms. And so when we say spirituality, what do we mean? Because I take great issue on social media, and you see me poking fun at it, of
Hmm.
like, don't tell me that a dream that my about my ex is them thinking about me in their waking life, because that's ridiculous.
Yes.
That's a silly thing, I believe, to believe. Now, it's okay if you believe different, but
I,
I'd be hard pressed to see a person show me some evidence to say that that is systematically, replicatably true.
right. There's a saying something about common sense and how some people are lacking a few dimes and nickels there, whatever. It's
It's
not so
true.
common, and I hate to admit it, but I it's so funny because a lot of these people feel like this is just common sense, and I'm looking at them. Yeah, you're a dime and a nickel short of common sense.
It's true. It's true. Well, so
um,
let me ask you this question. This seems like a very important topic to you. What's your
yes.
personal struggle with this topic of mental health versus religion? Because I think a lot of people feel very similarly to you, especially the people that are drawn to my page, because dreams
Yeah.
can be normally a spiritual topic. And I'm sort of reclaiming that through the science and, well, research of
Hmm.
psychology and mental health.
Yep.
What's your personal struggle with this conflict of topics?
So okay, so that's okay. That is a segue for me then back to where we started.
Right.
I was talking about the dream I had when I was a kid with that tree.
With the
Um,
appropriate. Yeah. Thanks for
um,
showing.
I I have had spiritual visions. Well, okay, let me take the spiritual out for half a second. I've had
I'm okay
visions.
if you want to keep it
I
in.
yeah, no, it's more for the audience if anybody does watch this. I've had
Okay.
visions. I've had dreams. I've had nightmares even.
Mm.
And things I can't explain. And I to me, a standard therapist would be like, oh, it's all the psyche, blah blah blah. What you ate last night. Did you break up with your girlfriend? Did you break up with your boyfriend? Whatever. Like just you know. That's I think where my issue is with standard therapy is this kind of quote unquote need to explain everything away. Um,
Ah,
because it makes sense if you can
I
explain
resonate.
it.
Yes.
Whereas with a pastoral thing, there's that sense of, well, hopefully there's this sense of there is a mystery. There are certain things that just can't be explained, and if you can somehow bring God into this picture or whatever religion you want to follow after, if you can bring that into the picture, that's what can help make sense of what you're experiencing, what you're
Yeah.
seeing, what you're hearing, whatever. Um, a, you know, I'll give you a couple examples of things that I have experienced that I rarely share with people, but um, I remember seeing one time I was at a church meeting and I had this picture of watching Jesus literally rising from the earth. He didn't
Mm.
have a face or anything, whatever. And I came up and I asked the pastor about it afterwards, and I know I weirded him out. It's
Huh.
like who has a vision of that? Like that's just, and he tried to explain it away, whatever, blah blah blah. And I just sat there, I was like, that doesn't answer my question at all of like why I had this vision. Like what does it mean?
Oh, wow.
What
Okay.
you know? There was a time where when I got into college, that's where my big spiritual awakening, and this is where I will put the spiritual, the supernatural, maybe that's a better
Yeah.
word,
No,
supernatural
that's great. It's your story.
experiences. Um, I was. It started with, I was working in a library up on campus, and I came home from the library, and I stood outside my dorm, and I was like, God, I don't. I was yelling this out basically. God, I don't believe in you. I think you're a fucking
Mhm.
liar. I don't, um, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was so. That's where I think I real like the rubber hit the road where counseling is necessary type
Yeah.
moment.
You sounded frustrated. Did you feel frustrated?
Oh, I was beyond frustrated. I
Oh,
was lost. I was scared. I was confused. I mean, lost really is I
that's the
mean,
biggest word, lost.
yeah.
Mm.
I walked through my dorm, my the front entry of my dorm, and there's this woman standing there, sophomore, senior, junior, I don't remember.
Okay.
Um, but she stopped me. She's like, "How you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm fine." And I took two steps. I turned around. I'm like, "No, actually, I'm not fine. I don't believe in this
Mm.
God of yours." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And so we sat down. We talked for about an hour, and I gave her three examples of areas where I knew God wasn't there. Just
Mm.
think, there was one. The first one was that counseling thing that I was telling you about.
Yep.
The second one was I was babysitting this kid and had those obtrusive thoughts that one is not supposed to talk about, and so I won't talk about it. But
Sure, sure, sure. The classic, for me, it's I'm holding an infant. Be like, just drop kick the baby.
oh
Go
my
ahead.
God, yes, that's exact. I
I've written about that in a couple of articles. It's just like drop the baby. It's like, yeah, I don't actually want to do that, but my brain is telling me something through those intrusive thoughts.
same thing. She's like, Jesus was crying with you because he knew your frustration and your, whatever, and he was trying to meet you where you were at, and each time she's drawing this picture of a living, breathing, flesh and blood Jesus person
Mm,
standing there with me.
mm,
And she's like, Kev, look, I have a call to make. I want you to go upstairs and picture an angel at the head of your bed, an angel at the foot of your bed, and Jesus, just sitting there with you, ministering to you. So I
okay.
went up to my room and I'm like, okay, this is freaking ridiculous. Like, whatever. There's an angel at the head of my bed. And I jumped in my bed. My roommate was doing his homework, and um, and I remember saying to myself, I don't remember the whole prayer, but it was basically like, God, look, I don't know what's going on, but you do. And as soon as
Mm,
no, I take that back. I'm sorry. What I said was, but God knows. That's what I said. I was
okay.
talking to the third person. I wasn't talking to God.
Sure.
But I was like, I don't know what's going on, but God knows. And as soon as I sat there, like it hit me. And this is why I say, like, for me, the big spiritual
This is your
understanding
awakening.
of a personal God, yeah, was God knows intimate, like, oh, right there. He was right in my heart, in my head, and he
Yeah.
knew like no other
Okay.
person. Like, I can explain till I'm blue in the face, but you can't fully 100% understand what I'm saying unless you have that exact same experience. And
Yeah.
here it
It's
is.
a personal
God
experience.
God knows. God knows. And I was in bed. I'm like, God knows. God knows. I'm like, God knows. Getting louder and louder and louder.
Was
My
that
roommate,
a good feeling for you that God knew, or
it
was
was
that almost
it
like a
was it was
convicting
4th of
feeling?
July. It was 4th of July in my heart. It was
It
literally,
was great. It was
yeah.
great.
Oh yeah. And my roommate
Hmm.
jumps up. He's like, "Yeah, Kev, God knows," and he goes flying out the door because I freaked him back out because it was like out of nowhere. It's out of nowhere. Like I was,
Scared him
lying
a
in
little
my
bit.
bed, and all of a sudden I'm like, "God
Yeah.
knows, God knows." But
So you've
you
had
know,
some pretty powerful, like spiritual, religious, or whatever term we want to use,
yeah,
metaphysical, kind of
well,
beyond this
I,
realm kind of
supernatural.
experiences.
I'll
And
call
so
it
where does that
supernatural.
supernatural? Yeah. So where does that bring you today? I mean, you certainly, I think each person's personal experience is for them, and I'm certainly not going to argue with it. but does that bring you to some kind of conflict today? Like, how does
Oh,
that fit
yes.
into your life now? Because I think that seems to be the topic that you're wrestling with.
Major leagues, it does.
Okay,
And
tell me about that.
uh, so for me, and this is where it gets awkward because I don't like talking about it much, but for me, a lot of it
Totally
comes
up to
down to
you. Don't have to
no,
talk about anything you don't want to.
no, I'll share it. It's I mean, because it's a real thing. So for me, I realized at an early age that I wrestled with same sex attraction.
Mm.
Um, we'll leave it at that. And it because of my Christian upbringing, I fought it for years. It was just
Yeah,
I was waiting for God to fix me. Bottom
yeah.
line.
Thanks for
Um,
sharing that. Yeah, it doesn't fit with a typical
no.
Christian philosophy.
Not, most. I mean, it's again that same. It's like it's this or that. You can't have both. You can't mix it.
There's no middle ground.
Um,
Yeah.
right.
Well, Bible says if there's a middle ground, God spits you out of his mouth, right?
Yeah. Basically, yes. Exactly.
Lukewarm. Yeah.
So it. I fought it. I waited for God to fix me. I had plenty of gay friends who were like, "Kev, there's nothing to fix. You're fine the way you are." Blah blah blah. Almost every single problem, and this is where it's kind of wild in my head. Like almost every single problem in my mind came from the not dealing with that. To me, it was like a cancer.
This is the stem.
Yeah.
Everything kind of stems back to this.
Right.
Well, this split inside of your soul, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's like,
Yep.
I feel and experience these things. This is my authentic self, but this other like religious component of my life that I've had a personal, vivid experience with doesn't fit with this other part of myself. And so,
Right.
but it's almost like, I think about it like, if you had multiple personalities inside of you, or like dissociative identity disorder, right? There's this one part of myself that doesn't get along with this other part of myself, and how do I bring those back together?
And I'll tell you honestly, it's funny. I look at the bad guys like in Batman and stuff like that, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, there, but for the grace of God go I. It's surprising I'm not split personalitied, or I mean, maybe I am, and I just don't realize it. But
Some of the most intelligent and beautiful human beings I've ever met are my DID clients, for sure. It's something I specialize in, and they're incredible people. Yeah.
I know I'm an incredible person, but it doesn't stop. Bottom line, the dislike of myself, the inability to accept love, compassion.
I'm having the light bulb moment. It's like, okay, we've come full circle. There it is. I can't accept myself. There's
Right.
this religious part of me. There's this experiential part of me where I do have same-sex attraction. How do I make those two parts of my life come together?
Right.
Am I phrasing the question
Yeah,
correctly?
well,
Is it
that's
like
yes,
I want
that is pretty
these two
much
parts
yes.
of me to be in cooperation, not antagonism.
Right. And not the least of which is, I mean, I'm 56 years old, and I've never experienced, like, one of the things I laugh at. Well, I don't laugh, but I relate to is these guys who are coming out in their 20s and 30s and stuff, and they're like, we never got to experience the love that most kids go through when they're in high school. We didn't get to to ask the boyfriend out. We didn't get
This is true.
we didn't get to date like normal people, etc. And I'm sitting thinking, I'm like, yeah, no. Not only did I not experience that, now I think I'm past the age of that. It's like
You feel like you've missed the boat entirely.
Oh yeah. The boat
So some
sailed
regret
and sank.
sinks in. Some regret, some fear of missing out. It's like, well,
Right.
I didn't get the high school experience, but now I might be past the point of love altogether. Which,
Right.
I mean, just if I could share personally, I very strongly disagree with that statement. I've had some wonderful experiences, and I'll just share briefly. I've had some wonderful experiences. I'm not sharing anybody's details, but more than one account of individuals who come to me in my practice and re-experienced dating and the puppy dog phase in their 80s.
Yeah.
And they'll tell me, they're like, Jesse, I feel like a horny teenage boy. I was like, yes, that's you'd be surprised. Like there is a renewed spike in libido in
the horny teenage boy is back there.
yeah. And so as they're like, I feel like I'm crazy. I'm like, no, you're experiencing what many other people just like you experience. It's never too late for love. That is my very deeply held belief.
And
it'll
I've
be
had
different for you. but
I've had a number
it's
of
never
people
too
say
late.
the same thing. It's never too late as long as you can still breathe. You're still viable.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But
but I can understand too how you're struggling to even make that leap because there's a predicate question of,
yeah.
well, I can't even start to explore what dating in my 50s is like or 60s is like until I answer the I don't even know how they fit together. I'm still at that place of, well, I
Hmm.
think I don't like myself. I can't accept
Hmm.
myself because how do these two parts of me combine?
The bottom line, and with my, a few of my closest friends who are gay and Christian, um, I mean, they claim Christianity. I can't speak one way or the other to that, but um, for me, the bottom line comes down to there's a verse in Scripture, and I don't remember, maybe the Leviticus verse that everybody always quotes, but it's like, a man lying with another man is an abomination, and that to me feels like the core tenet of my existence. I can't be with another man because I would be an abomination to God, and
Mm,
so pretty much in many ways the whole thing about how salvation, Jesus died for our sins. We're no longer held guilty if we come to him and accept his death for us on the cross and blah blah blah. Not to go into the whole religious thing, but
yeah,
if we accept that, then we are heaven bound. We are God is with us, God is for us. And I sit there thinking, I'm like, I know all the words. I've been taught them. I've been, it's like the knowledge of it is, and I believe it, but there's still that cardinal not cardinal. The bottom line comes down to, but I still want to sleep with a man.
yeah, yeah.
Which means that I'm an abomination to God. So how can an abomination become forgiven and sanctified and
Fantastic question, Kevin. Fantastic question. One that I've helped people struggle and wrestle with many, many times in my practice. And here's what I want to model as well. This is not my question to answer for you, right? I've got
right?
my own personal beliefs about that, but that
I
doesn't
know.
matter in this space.
Hmm.
Um, my job, my role as a counselor in my private practice, even though this is different, is to help people think things through, right? Not to
Right.
tell them what to think, but to help them
Right.
think. And so let's kind of reduce this down. Let's look at this critically, right? You've got a problem.
Yeah.
This doesn't fit with this. So
Right.
that's okay. Many situations in our life are like that. In fact, I use that metaphor quite often with anxiety and depression. There is the world I hope for, right? My
Yeah.
expectations, my hopes, and then there's the reality of the world. And whatever
Hmm.
that space between the two of them is going to be the intensity of your anxiety and depression. Our goal in
Hmm.
therapy and counseling is to bring those two into alignment so they're the
Hmm.
same,
Hmm.
right? So, okay, we've identified your space. Your space is, I feel this way, but my strongly held beliefs tell me to feel this way. How do
Hmm.
I bridge that gap? The
Hmm.
question then I would ask to you in order to think critically is, well, I think we have one of two decisions. Either one, um, you are living in a way that needs to be changed. Some of your
Hmm.
actions need to be changed. Or
Hmm.
two, there's a misunderstanding of what religion or the Bible is telling you, and that's up to you to make a decision about. You can
Right.
see it on the front of the door of my office, right? It says Lyon Counseling, and it says at the bottom, acceptance through awareness. Either
Hmm.
one, you have to accept that, well, this is some dissonance inside of you, and
Hmm.
making peace with that dissonance and finding
Hmm.
out a right way to live with that acceptance. Or there's a lack of awareness. There's something about either what the Bible says or your experience as a human being and your sexual attraction that we're unaware of yet that would unlock this for you. And so I
Right.
kind of present that question to you. It's like, well, are you sure about what you believe religiously, or is there a struggle to make deliberate steps toward what you've already chosen?
Right.
Where do you feel
Well,
like that lies in you?
it there's well, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, we're wrestling
um,
with it together here, Kevin.
yeah. There's I've two kind of responses to that before I get into the heart of it. One
Okay.
is I saw this thing on Instagram the other day. About a gay Christian who he has a ministry, reaching out to other Christians who wrestle with the same thing. And
Mm,
one of the things he said is that for most of them, they all had the decision to become a Christian was always based out of, um, you're going to go to hell. You're going to go to hell.
For
You're going to
many
go
it
to hell.
is. For many it
Um,
is. Yes.
and I'm, I won't say that that wasn't necessarily a part of it for me. I didn't want to go to hell, obviously. Um, but since becoming a Christian, I have found that there's far more to it. Now that being said, is I've also heard plenty of sermons, stuff like that, in which, I mean, Jesus spoke more about hell than he did anything else. And his thing being, I don't want you to go there either. But hell is
Right.
not something. It's not a place I send you to. Hell is a place I had to create because you don't want to be with me. And if absolute perfection has to create a place, you know, what is that place? It's obviously something that's anti-perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. And the fact that I choose to
Yeah, like
be
perfect
there,
destruction. It's like it still needs to
yeah,
be perfect, but then therefore perfect destruction.
right, utter destruction. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact is that I'm the one that's choosing to be there because I don't want to be with God. So what's my other option? To not be with God, therefore to go to hell. Um,
Hmm.
that that kind of blew me away when I heard that guy say that, because I sat there thinking, I'm like, it's funny because it really does come to that almost black and white. Um, who, what is my choice? Either A, I go to be with God, or B, and again, I know I'm looking at this from a Christian perspective. I can't speak for the Buddhist or, any of those other religions,
I'm following with you. I'm following with
but,
you. Yeah, it may not be my personal beliefs, but I'm
right.
living in Kevin's world right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of blew me away. But the other thought, and I'll tell you, it's funny. I appreciate that you said that. You have your own beliefs. For me, and maybe this is why counseling has never necessarily worked for me in the past. But it's like I myself grow better when I get other people's perspectives on things. The dialogue, the et cetera. So for me, it's like a lot of times now, and it's funny because my counselor doesn't necessarily, she doesn't give it to me 100%, but she does kind of, I'll share my thoughts and stuff like that. And then she'll come back. She's like, well, here's my thoughts on that.
Hmm.
What do you think? And as I said, in the past, other counselors have been like, oh, well, no, this is what you should be thinking. Don't tell me what I should be thinking, because I'm
I
thinking
certainly
what I'm,
that's far too disrespectful. I would never.
yeah, I'm thinking what I'm thinking. Whether I should be thinking it or not is not is not the point. The point is I
Yeah.
am thinking it. So let's deal with it there. And so
Well,
for my counselor,
I
oh,
have
sorry.
I have maybe a thought to add then. Not about what you should think, but a pattern that maybe I'm identifying, and I'm curious what you think of it. Um, again, not a spiritual leader. I really think it's up to you to decide what you believe. I'm certainly not going to tell you that.
Right.
However, there is something interesting. As I listen to you talk, a lot of these things get split into a black and white dichotomy, which seems to be very common for your way of thinking. It's also something very common for a person who has experienced trauma. Our brain, if we make a different metaphor to somebody who's experienced maybe some
I've experienced trauma. What?
who knew?
Oh my goodness! No, that's
For
dramatic
somebody
thought.
well, oh my gosh, I was having breakfast this morning with an individual that I was having a conversation with, and I said something to them. They talked about the amount of perfectionism they had. They talked about how hard they worked. They talk about how they never feel good enough. And so I just said very simply to them, you don't have to be perfect in order to be safe. And they just stopped. And they looked at me in the eyes. They're like, oh my gosh. And they took out their phone and they wrote it down. You don't have to be perfect in order to be safe. Because for them, they got stuck in a dichotomy. And this is what happens oftentimes with my clients as we work through hypnotherapy. It's like, well, I have to be perfect. If I'm not perfect, I'm in danger. Well, that's just simply a false dichotomy. Right. And so, I hear you talking about this, and it's like, you're like, I'm choosing to be with God or I'm choosing to be away from God. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That seems to be predicated on a false premise of, well, you didn't choose to be this way. Right. You just have this thing, and I even think about, some of the things that have been quoted to me by other Christians. Paul talks about the thorn in his side, and he prays to God, I wish you would take away this thorn in my side. And God says, no, he doesn't. Because I think, the God of Christianity that I've been told by other Christians about, and the one that you're telling me about, is a God of gray. You don't have to be perfect to be with him. And so there is a lot of self-acceptance. And if I understand the message of Christianity correctly, it's this message that in the gray, God's perfection is made known. And so I think, perhaps that is what it is. If it comes down to a struggle between acceptance and awareness, perhaps the biggest struggle for you then, Kevin, is I just need to accept this is how I am, and that's okay. I'm
Yeah.
always struggling, striving to be better. But perfection is never a realistic goal. And
Yeah.
actually, in the process of refining, of self-actualizing who I am, which is something Carl Jung talks about, which is something that Abraham Maslow talks about, right? All these great counselors, I do see the parallels between religion and psychology, where it's like perfection is never an option, but striving towards the best version of ourselves is what life is all about. And so, Kevin, I just wonder, does any of that resonate with you? Perhaps you're struggling too far for perfection,
Well,
getting black and white.
what's funny is I had that kind of revelatory moment this morning.
We're
And I
on the
think
same page then. That's beautiful.
your words actually put it a lot more succinctly than I could have. I will share this little detail. I've been overdrawn in my account for the last month. That's what started my depression. I was doing
Financial
what I could.
stress is heavy.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Kevin.
the perfectionism in me is like, I'm doing what I can to make ends meet, and I can't even make ends meet. Like, what's wrong with me? I
Economy's
can't,
rough.
um, and so that started my depression. And like I said, the meds at the same time did not help. I hit rock bottom, and I ran from church, and um, I had I think you were saying, somebody was telling me that oh no, it was my counselor was saying, she's like, that's a codependency thing. That rather than looking for, to meet where you're at and find hope and answers and stuff like that, you run back to, it's like, oh my God, I'm in trouble. I don't know what to do. Let me pull into it, be a turtle and pull into my shell. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't remember exactly what her line of thinking was. It's just, it was a codependency thing that stuck in my head, and I'm like, okay, so now I'm kind of, gnawing on that, mulling on that, what that means. Um,
Was she perhaps
but
saying that in moments when things don't go according to plan, you very quickly look to others for answers rather than trusting yourself?
that could have been what she was saying.
Because
Again, I
that's
didn't.
definitely a codependency trait. It's like, oops, I
Yeah.
made a mistake. Therefore, I need to surrender my autonomy to somebody, something else.
Yeah, that could be what she said. As I said, I got caught up on her words, and
Sure,
so I
sure,
didn't
sure, sure.
exactly hear her message. But my, it was funny because Sunday night I went into church, and I didn't want to, but we had, a meeting for this missions thing that I'm doing, and one of the guys came up to me, and he's like, Kev, we were so worried about you. Like, we haven't seen you in the last few weeks, and we were wondering, did you go to a different church? Did we, like, what did we do wrong? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is not a common experience for me for church. A lot of times when I go to it, the first thing I get is well, you should. It's like, you should be here in church. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And don't tell me what I should be doing. What I should or shouldn't be doing. I have enough of that in my own head. What I want is somebody to come alongside me and say, "Wow, I see you're hurting," and I mean, I can't offer you necessarily any advice. I can't do, but I can sit here with you while you want to cry or something like that. And
Yeah,
that's basically what he did. I mean, he
yeah,
stood there, and I just started tearing up, and he came up and kind of put his arm around my shoulder, and the awkwardness of like, well, how far I don't want to overstep my boundaries here, but so I mean, the fact that he even offered to just put an arm around me,
yeah. It's
just
nice. It's what you needed.
it was exactly what I needed. And I sat there thinking, I'm like, why have I been running away from church? This is exactly where God has called me. I know that. I knew that a year ago when I first started going. I was like, and I was like, because I'm so used to, um, and I hate to say it, but just such a negative. People in church don't comprehend. And I know that's a blanket statement, but they don't comprehend grace and mercy. And even myself, I'm wrestling with an issue going on with a coworker, and God is constantly reminding me, grace and mercy, grace and mercy. I'm like, she doesn't deserve it. She's a bitch. You know? And he's like,
The
Kev,
words of Sigmund Freud start to come into my head of like, oh, projection. I give myself no grace and mercy, therefore nobody else gets grace and mercy. It's like,
and
oh, guilty. This
that's
guy,
that's
guilty.
and that's exactly it. And that's the thing is here's God saying to me, he's like, Kev, if I treated you the way you're treating her, and I'm like, and I sat there thinking, I'm like, that's true. You really don't treat me like that. You really do show me grace and mercy. And how come I can't even show it to myself? I don't,
That's a great question. And I want to pause there. How do you
yes.
answer that question? It seems like, we've had this conversation for the past 50 minutes. which is fantastic. And kind of all arriving to this point of the solution to your problem is grace and mercy. It's accepting all parts of yourself. Not saying that all parts are great and should be expressed in the way that you want to be expressed. Like sometimes I'm driving on I-4 and I want to run somebody off the road because they're driving like a lunatic. Well, I probably shouldn't do that, right? But I also accept that there's
insurance, if nothing else.
Yeah, for real. So it sounds like you've arrived to the conclusion. One, what do you think it is that keeps you from expressing primarily that grace and mercy to yourself? And I have a follow-up question. Why?
I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that. I have asked myself that same question.
And I love that. I know I'm interrupting, but I want to interrupt because then maybe you don't need to know why. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to figure out why. In my experience as a counselor, is why is the least helpful question.
Yeah.
How does it feel? What does it feel like? When do you feel it? All the other of the basic questions: who, what, when, where, why. Why is the last one for a reason? It's the least helpful. And so, Kevin, maybe if I could very humbly ask the question for you, maybe you don't need to know why. Maybe the struggle is in you just need to take action. What is one way that you can show yourself grace and mercy now that would improve your life? And I bet you have an idea of what that would look like already.
To be honest, I don't. Because quite honestly, that has been the question I have wrestled with for the last 20 plus years. And I went into my counselor often said, I don't see a purpose for my life. That's what for me it comes down to. Why am I here? I know it's the why question, but it's like, what do I have to offer?
We get stuck in those why questions. We like them as humans.
Yeah.
But they're often not helpful.
A side note too is I laugh because even in scripture, every single one of the people mentioned there have that kind of question. God, why? God, why? God never answers the why. Never answers the why.
Yeah.
And if anything, he comes back like, oh yeah, like thinking about Job is like, where were you when I created the earth? Where were you? Like, can you make Leviathan do this? Can you do that? Can you tell the seas to stop here and go no further or whatever? And anyways, that brings up a whole other thing which I won't get into. But
that's a whole other topic. Yes.
The bottom line comes down to is like God doesn't answer the why. He just says, trust me. When you mentioned about the thing with Paul, like, Paul saying, can you do this? And God's like, no, I'm not going to.
I'm not gonna.
And I'm sure there's, but why? You don't need to know why. The fact is I did this on purpose. And I shared this with my pastor the other day. And it was actually, and again, where I came up with that moment this morning was this, I said to him, I said, God has kind of revealed to me. He's like, Kev, you think you put yourself there. You think that you made bad choices and bad decisions. And so
There's
you're putting it all on you.
For you. Yes.
Yeah. And the fact is, I want you to think about it a different way. I put you there. I did it for a reason. I want you to be dependent on me. I legitimately, you have nowhere to go. You can't, you can't just make money come out of thin air. You can't pull it out of your ass. You can't, could you go get a new job? Yeah, you could. But even then, it still won't change where you're at right this very second. I put you there because I want you to depend on me. I want you to see me, my miracle, that when I say that I am strong enough to take care of you, I am strong enough to take care of you. I am able to take care of you. So that was a good thing. But this morning, like I said, it was funny. I woke up and again, I was stressing out. I'm like, God, I just don't have money. Like, how am I going to buy food this weekend? How am I, I don't have the funds. I mean, I can put on credit cards, but that's just, exacerbating the problem. Like,
right,
I don't know what to do. And all of a sudden this peaceful, moment, which you put in better words, and I wish I remember what they were, but it was,
well, it's recorded.
Yeah, that's true. I'll go back and watch it. But, this peaceful moment came over me like, you are not a bad person. You're in a bad place.
Correct.
And I just sat there. I was like, I'm actually okay. Yeah, no, I don't have money to pay anything, but you know what? Right now, I don't need money to pay anything. I just have to go into my job. I have gas in my tank. I have a roof over my head. I have people who love me. All these things, like, just...
Well, and so asking those other questions can be very helpful. It's like, well, what got me here? How did I get here? When did it start to go downhill? And by answering those other questions, why answers itself. That's why it's the last of the questions. Who, what, when, where, why.
Yeah.
And so I do agree with that, and I think there are many situations in our life that, as we go through the pain of living, help refine us as a person and help grow us. But the most important thing is, as we go through those things, the suffering without meaning is purposeless. That's called torture, suffering
Yeah.
without meaning. But as we make meaning of the painful things that we go through, we learn stuff and we do grow as people. Now, I don't wish suffering on anybody, but
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that suffering is an inevitable reality of being alive.
Yep.
But if we are critical about that suffering and are like, well, what was that like? How did I get there? When did it start? And we find really solid answers. We sit with ourselves and find the answers to those questions. We can make different choices moving forward. And that's called self-actualization.
Right. Right.
And that starts with an awareness of, I'm in a pretty shit spot. And I accept that I'm in a pretty shit spot, but I also accept that I can start to ask myself questions about, what can I do differently to try again?
Yeah.
I think, does that resonate? I mean, it sounds like that's where you're at.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's funny, as you're talking, I sit there and I confess I'm my brain is going off on a bit of a tangent, but I'm sitting there thinking, like, why can't I find friends like you? The conflict thing aside, like, I mean, people who just like think. Period.
Thinking. Well,
Um,
and I've always told people, they're like, when did you decide to be a counselor? I was like, I still haven't decided to be a counselor. I was like, when I was in high school, I fell in love with philosophy, and I always knew I wanted to study philosophy, which is kind of the science of thinking.
Yep.
But I knew that made no income. So I was like, well, how can I be a philosopher without being a philosopher? So I became a counselor.
Well, my whole life, everyone I knew always encouraged me to either be a teacher or be a counselor. And that thought intrigued me, but it was the same thing. It's like, how do I make money doing that? I don't, and anyways, whatever. That's neither here nor there. But the thing is like, I do, there's still that thought in my head is like, is it too late? It's never too late. I could always go back and get my counseling degree or something.
Never too late.
I need the money to go to school right now. but,
Well, and
but
that journey to being a counselor starts with, well, I've got to get my life right before I can help others. Which,
true.
I mean, you see mirrored in many religious texts. The Bible says, worry about the log in your own eye before you deal with the speck in somebody else's. But that, again, that type of sentiment is mirrored in almost every religion.
Right.
So it leads me to believe that it's a fundamental human truth of, like, I think you've got a great idea, but in order to accomplish those things, first, the what, the how, well, I've got to start taking some steps to correct the things that I know to correct in my life before I have the capacity to help walk that journey with other people who also need.
And I'll tell you, it's funny. That's where your posts, especially like on Twitter and not Twitter, sorry, and YouTube, with your counseling journey, with Jeff, is it? No,
With Jeff?
who's the guy you're meeting with? The
guy
bald guy.
The bald guy. Oh. Well, now you said Jeff. Ed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, your conversations with him, like, and like, I still, I kind of laugh. I haven't watched it yet, but the one you posted about where this made Jesse cry, and I'm like, I was like, see, that's the counselor I want. Like, human being. Like, as much as for a long time I was pedestalizing you, like, oh my God, this guy is like, what a great counselor, blah blah blah. And
I know, I do know. Yeah, that happens a lot with people on social media.
Me many times, I'm human, and to see that humanity displayed, helps me beyond what you could even possibly imagine. It's
I'm
just
glad.
seeing you as a person, seeing that you have questions, and I'm like, oh my God, he's normal.
I am normal.
Normal.
And I tell people that all the time. They're like, what's the recipe for success? Like, how'd you do it? And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm certainly not done. I've achieved some level of success. Yes, I can validate and acknowledge that. But I'm certainly not perfect. And that's one.
Yeah.
But two, the recipe is patient consistency.
Yeah.
And so it's,
and I know
patiently doing the right thing every day for years is something that is very, very hard to do. And it's not like The Secret is not some difficult recipe. It's just like, did you get up and do the right things today? Right? What is one thing that you're trying to improve on? And so for me, that was like my physical health, right? Or that's running a practice, or that's like speaking kindly to my friends and my partner. Like, what is one thing that you're going to implement in your life and then be outrageously, ridiculously consistent in making that thing better? And that level of focus and diligence is what creates really incredible things. And if you look at the stories of success that we really idolize, you know, it's this person who had an idea and relentlessly pursued that idea every day in small ways over the course of many, many years. I mean, a lot of people don't know that I started this company in 2017. I mean, I've been running my own private practice for 8 years now. I've been talking with people about their mental health struggles for over 10 years now. And so they're just like, oh, look at this young guy who's got this practice and a YouTube channel. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't see the 10 years before today.
Right.
That's the only way that I got here, is like the refining process of patient diligence. And that process is painful, but it really is beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the time now. I know we've kind of gone over the hour. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. No. It's good. It's good. I know you got to get to work too, and I got to get back to the office as well. Kevin, thank you so much for sharing such a personal part of your story. I hope that it speaks to other people. I'd love to have some comments and discussion. What do you think? For all those watching about this topic, what are your personal experiences? Let's weigh in and start a conversation down below. Any last words before we wrap up here, Kevin?
No, I think it's. I didn't get a chance to share my supernatural stories with you, but
hey, maybe for a later episode. Episode.
That'll be fun.
I love it. Well, Kevin, thanks again. We'll catch you in the next one, and until then, bye.
All right, so long.